Welcome everyone to today's session on the Odoo Implementation Methodology. My name is Julian and I work as a business analyst and team leader in the professional services department here at Odoo Belgium. We're responsible for the successful implementation of cloud-based Odoo databases, and if you want to ask questions during the talk, please save them for later. There will be a dedicated time slot for that. Odoo is a broad solution. It attracts a diversity of customers with different organizational structural setups, different number of people, and a diversity of sectors. That is good for Odoo as a solution, brings a lot of revenue and many users, but it poses challenges on the implementation side. It is sometimes hard to say beforehand what level of organization can we expect, what level of knowledge of the customer requirements can we expect. So we had to come up with an approach that is applicable to all these different circumstances, but still not too rigid, so we cannot adapt it to the different circumstances of our customers. The first principle hereby is the standard first principle. Standard first means we always try to find a solution for a requirement based on the standard functionality of Odoo. May it require some workarounds or a customization using, for instance, our Studio solution. But a development should only be made if it is really necessary and there's no standard-based solution for it. Why? Developments delay the project implementation significantly. They increase the complexity and they create a technological debt that poses problems later when we want to upgrade, migrate a database. Secondly, don't be driven by customer satisfaction only. Very often it is easy to say yes. If the customer comes with a requirement, you can develop it, you can customize the solution. You want to satisfy the customer during the process of implementing this solution. But as this graph nicely illustrates, the customer satisfaction has a tendency to decrease throughout an implementation. You see at the beginning, the customer just bought the solution, is excited about the broadness of features and scope of the solution, and then the kickoff starts the project. The satisfaction goes slightly down throughout the implementation and hits a low just before the go live. Why is that? Customer satisfactions are difficult to assess accurately and precisely before you start really working on the solution itself. Sometimes compromises have to be found for previously unknown requirements. Sometimes unexpected requirements come up out of nowhere. The implementation is delayed. So there's many reasons why the satisfaction can go down. Before the go live, the customer is stressed. Often the majority of end users are confronted with the solution only then or short before the planned go live. Last minute feedback is being gathered. Requirements have to change. Last minute changes have to be implemented. So there's an increased workload and increased frustration right before the go live. When the satisfaction increases again is, of course, once the system is in production and the people that use it on a daily basis have learned to use it and are benefiting from the increased efficiency it offers. We focus instead on project success. That means we make sure, even though it sometimes means to, for instance, put a complex development requirement on hold and postpone it for later, we focus on moving on with the key requirements, the quick wins of the project. Because that is what ultimately establishes the trust if the software is actually in production and the customer can actually use the system. Never forget the bottom line, which is to onboard users. It is not to please the single point of contact or the internal project manager that wants you to listen to their specific requirements. It is to onboard users on time and in budget so they can actually use the system and benefit from it on a daily basis in their operations. In navigating these diversity of clients, we realized it is hard to establish one-size-fits-all approach, but what we realized is it is a mindset that you can apply and that helps you successfully find answers to challenging problems throughout the implementation. This mindset consists of some key points and aspects, which is first responsibility, simplicity, and autonomy. Responsibility, because at any point in time the project requires clear responsibilities both on the integrators, the project implementer side, and the customer side. The customer is responsible for the what and the why, and the integrator is responsible for the how it is being done. It is okay to say no, and it is also okay to demand precision and an actual relevance of the requirements, so to challenge what the customer brings to the table and only realize what is being validated as absolutely necessary. Simplicity implies that we reduce the paperwork, the documentation, and the number of meetings as well as the number of attendees to what is crucial and relevant to the actual implementation. Autonomy means, in the context of an Odoo implementation, that we as implementers do our best to train the customer throughout the process so they can internally disseminate the knowledge on how the Odoo solution works and focus on internal change management rather than translating requirements based on the existing way of how things are done. But now you will ask how to deliver, how to on a daily basis operate the actual implementation. Before we go into that, we have to talk about an important part of the project, which is setting it on track from the beginning. At Odoo, this important task is being done already in the sales process. In the sales process, the sales responsible qualifies the customer's needs and does something that we call a return on investment analysis, which includes defining the budget, finding the budget, clarifying the methodology, discussing the planning of the project, and in some cases also provide a proof of concept so the customer already has an idea of what sort of solution he can expect from Odoo. Then we move on into the actual implementation work by designing the implementation cycles. The implementation cycle consists of largely 3 different stages, which first is of course the design cycle, the design stage, where we analyze and refine the requirements. Secondly, the realization phase, where we work on the actual configuration, on potential developments if necessary, and of course on data migration. Ultimately, we validate what we discussed and what we configured and move it into a production environment. So when the implementation cycle is finished, we have an actual result in the production environment that could potentially already be used. Once this whole cycle is completed, we validate the phase as a whole, train the end users, if necessary, adapt certain configurations, and if everything is validated, we go live. In the planning of a implementation cycle, it is important to structure different implementation cycles in relevant business flows or separately usable Odoo modules, such as sales and invoicing or inventory and manufacturing. But ultimately, never forget, of course, that a large part of the implementation is the training and validation of configurations and the end users. So we save time on doing training ourselves by training the central point of contact, so they can do large parts of this job by themselves. When you're ready for the go live, of course, you have to be present for the customer to respond to the increased number of on-demand queries and ensure that the go live is successful and well received by the end users. When we talk about staffing, we came to define a specific set of roles that can differ among different scenarios, which in this case I will talk only about two. One being the quick start project, which is normally a smaller project for a small company or SME, and larger projects where the complexity is increased and a much larger number of users is involved. In the quick start context, this implies on the sales side one single point of contact, which we call the business advisor, who is there for the customer to check in on the satisfaction, check in if the expectations are met, and potentially help in solving disagreements or misunderstandings. One project leader that is the single responsible for the implementation project itself on the integrators or implementers side, while in some cases this project leader can require the expertise of app experts of certain domains like finance, logistics, manufacturing, etc. Or, of course, in case of developments, a developer. On the customer side, we have what we call the SPOC, the single point of contact, who should ideally remain the same throughout the entire project lifetime, in order to centralize knowledge, but also the decision-making behind different implementation cycles. In some cases, there is a sponsor, someone who originally onboarded or brought in the Odoo software as an idea into the customer's company, who can also sometimes be helpful and clarify what the bottom line was, and to make sure the company's vision is represented in the priorities. In the context of a larger project, we add a layer which we call the steering committee, consisting of a project director on the integrator side and a higher level single point of contact on the company side, on the customer side, who are not directly involved in the operational part of the implementation, but help to make sure the milestones are kept, the planning is respected, and the overall vision of the project and priorities of the project are maintained. On the delivery side and the daily operations, the project leader remains the main responsible, working with a developer or an expert in case of needed. There's still only one single point of contact on the sales side to reduce the complexity on minimum. And as far as the delivery is concerned, the key user there can be multiple key users from every single department, and a project leader works with each of them, or potentially multiple project leaders with multiple key users. To summarize the core ideas and principles behind the Odoo implementation methodology, It is first and foremost the focus on the standard of Odoo, to focus on the project success rather than the customer satisfaction, to keep a mindset focusing on responsibility, autonomy, and simplicity, and making sure that the roles are respected at any time during the project. Now there will be a time reserved for a Q&A, so please stay tuned. Thank you very much. Autonomy and simplicity, making sure that the roles are respected at any time during the project. Now there will be a time reserved for...
Should that video like that? All right. So we just had a little technical improvement there. Julien, tell me, I've seen in the chat quite some things coming across about this being a standard methodology. What makes the approach so successful for Odoo?
What makes the methodology or this approach successful for Odoo is that it is basically grown out of the history of hundreds of project implementations, taking into account the modular flexibility of the system around which implementation cycles can easily be designed. So this is basically a methodology that grew out of as the system is designed, and that's why it works well together with this implementation approach. Yeah.
So the fact that we're modular actually helps us to support the implementation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of comments around the implementation methodology are the fact that we are focused on being standard.
Yeah.
There was a comment from Eric, and there was also comments about development. How would you say that the methodology that we have deals with custom requests and chasing some approaches that might be a little bit more difficult?
Yeah. The approach as such deals with this in a way that we're trying to, we have, as we are a very broad and flexible solution, we have the possibility to offer multiple roads to the same destination, right? Functionally speaking, we can adjust with using tools like Studio to customize the system to a small degree, to bring it closer to what the customer requires without having to do an actual development, right? So the system allows us to provide solutions close to what the customer is asking while not jeopardizing the safety and the stability of the system.
Okay. And when around the implementation phase would you advise clients to incorporate such customization?
Well, absolutely, if it is a crucial business requirement that we can't do without and there's no feasible or, let's say, sufficient way of doing that in standard.
Okay, great. So another question that came up were the, or actually a question that we came up also, the challenges that someone might face during this approach.
Yeah.
What can you share about those?
Well, often a challenge is that customers bring to you a set list of requirements that mostly is born out of their historic system they are using. They often come with a system that has been highly customized to their needs, so they never had to question their own flows, business flows, just because a system suggests a certain way of doing things. We do it the other way around. We tell and demonstrate different ways how Odoo can actually solve a problem, a business flow problem, while other, let's say, service companies often say, okay, whatever you're saying, we're realizing it. So customers come to us with a different mindset as far as the relationship of service provider and customer is concerned. But we are challenging this mindset by saying, wait a second, I don't think this is a good idea. I propose you an alternative. 1, 2, 3, right? Okay. So in that sense, we are not only challenging the usage of a system, we are challenging the processes as they currently are as a whole, and by that have a certain change management impact on the company that we are implementing Odoo for.
Okay, great. Now, during your talk, you also mentioned the single point of contact on the customer side, or the SPOC, as we like to call them. What makes the single point of contact as a success for an implementation of Odoo?
That's a very good question. Judging from experience, some competences and qualities that make a Spock a really good partner in implementation is a good internal network, good relationship, and a general understanding of the business model of the company we're implementing, so that change management impulses can be given and are also being accepted by the key users, right? So it's a challenge in communicating effectively to the end users and having a certain credibility as far as the functional knowledge is concerned, so they can serve as a trainer inside the company.
Okay, great. So we have the single point of contact. We have the focus on first using the capability of Odoo before we move into any development of customizations.
Yeah.
During the talk, you also mentioned something about a steering commission when projects are a little bit too large or become larger. When would you say that a project becomes too big or big enough for such a steering commission?
Yes. There are certainly cases where the business units included in this project are so diverse and vast and include so many hierarchical structures that it is very hard for one single point of contact to communicate effectively. For that reason, very often a steering committee is a good added, let's say, layer in order to ensure that no, let's say, dysfunctional politics come up and that a sponsor has heard something that doesn't go the way it was initially intended. Stops the continuation of the implementation itself. That can be very dysfunctional and puts the project success in jeopardy. So that's why it is often good if there's a higher level where, let's say, the sponsors who originally onboarded the system, the key decision makers who also are responsible for the budget, etc., can first align each other with an Odoo responsible before the implementation itself is being affected by this.
Okay, great. Maybe a last question. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the questions on the chat anymore, but I'm sure that if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to anyone at Odoo, maybe on the chat or on our live chat afterwards to still get answers to those questions.
Yeah.
Maybe another question. Odoo focuses a lot on SMEs, right? We're getting more mid-market and corporate clients, but also a lot of smaller clients. When would you advise to one of those potential users or starting Odoo users to start working with an Odoo consultant on such methodology? Is any company too small or any project too small to work with this?
Yeah, I think in this case it is not about scale and number of users or number of employees. It is also a bit a question of process complexity and business model complexity, right? Some businesses have very few employees and thus users, but have a huge automation requirement, right? And spanning across different business activities, where a consultant can add value by bringing the Odoo knowledge to the table, bringing project experience to the table, and coming up with creative solutions from the perspective of the Odoo capability, while the Spock can bring the business knowledge and business expertise to the table.
Okay, all right. A very last question. If somebody wants to read a little bit more about the implementation methodology, is there anything online that they can go and have a read?
Absolutely. We have implementation methodology book, first of all, that is accessible online on our website. We have, of course, if you get in touch with any of our sales representatives, they will be happy to explain you the methodology and provide you with resources that we have at disposal. And there's, of course, hundreds of videos and online material that you can access in order to educate yourself about implementation methodology specific to Odoo.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your talk, for your presence here, and to answer all the questions. Thank you for watching this live stream. We hope you enjoyed the content, and we wish you a great further Odoo experience 2020.
Thank you very much.